On January 24, 1991, at 4:45 p.m., 13-year-old Paola Illera came home from school in East Harlem, New York. As she got into the lift at her apartment building and headed for the 30th floor room for her family, her mother buzzed her in. But for some reason, she disappeared during that short trip. Finally, at 7:30 p.m., 3 hours later, a man walking his dog found Paola's dead body half a mile from her house. As that terrible day came to a close, people in the neighborhood were left with nagging questions. What happened to Paola? Who could be responsible for her death? Hi, and welcome back to our channel. If you are new here, please consider subscribing, as it helps us motivate to create more intriguing content for you. Let's have a look at the unsolved mystery of Paola Illera. Paola and her family lived in East Harlem, which is also called El Barrio, and is in the middle of Manhattan in New York City. This small area is famous for having a lively mix of customs, art, and community spirit. The lively festivals, restaurants, and colorful murals that line the streets of East Harlem show that the people who live there are very diverse, with a strong Hispanic and Latino background. The well-known Museum of the City of New York, which shows the past of the city, is in this neighborhood. Statistics show that there is a 1 in 22 chance of being a victim of crime in East Harlem. This is where our story started. Cesar and Olga Illera had a daughter named Paola. The two bigger kids she had were Julio and Alexandra. Paola moved to East Harlem, New York City, with her mother and two brothers in June 1990 in search of a better life. They stayed with Paola's Uncle Guo Opa on the 30th floor of an apartment block at 420 East 111th Street. Cesar, her father, stayed in Colombia to work as a taxi driver and save money so he could finally come to New York with them. When they got to New York, Paola started going to junior high school, 99. Alexandra, Paola's sister, says that she did very well in school and spent her free time learning English and maths. She only had a few friends, mostly peers, and wanted to be a lawyer to help people. Her uncle said she was very smart, grown for her age, and able to think beyond her years. It was also said that Paola was happy in New York because she loved English so much. Her uncle Guo said she was a young girl with a lot of goals for the future. It looked like things were going well for Paola and her family, until something terrible happened and turned their lives upside down. Paola Illera disappeared after returning home in East Harlem, New York. Despite community efforts, she was found dead 3 hours later near the East River, surrounded by drug-related items, about half a mile from her apartment building. As soon as the police got to the scene, they saw something very sad.
In the center of her chest, and further examination revealed that she had a ligature around her neck, and there was hardly any blood.
There were no hints that could point to a person as the criminal. The killing of Paola had a huge impact on not only her family but also the whole neighborhood. Her mother Olga couldn't calm down and was having a hard time accepting that her daughter had died. Both the kids and the teachers at Paola's school were shocked. After this terrible event, teachers got together with students to support those who were close to Paola and help them deal with their grief. Also, they told all the kids that it was unsafe to walk alone in the area. Because of what happened, reporters were not allowed to go into the school, and the principal and other district leaders refused to talk to them. A lot of questions were left open for the detectives. They went from floor to floor in the 32-story building looking for people who might have seen Paola in the area where her body was found. They tried to find someone who had seen her, but they couldn't find anyone. Also, the officers didn't know anything about how the person who did this horrible thing would look. It was still not clear if Paola was killed in the lonely place with the crack bottles where her body was found, or if she was killed somewhere else. The agents were able to put together some important pieces of information as they looked into the case. They found out that Paola often stayed at school after school on Wednesdays and Thursdays for a writing workshop. She had been writing a piece about her father that she planned to send to him as a Valentine's Day gift on the day she was killed. The agents learned that Paola left school around 4 p.m. after the workshop and walked north along First Avenue with a friend. At 106th Street, they split ways. Paola went on to her family's apartment building. Detectives found out that another teen, Aaron Wofford, had gone into the same lift as Paola while they were investigating. When they talked to him, he said he got off at the 19th floor, while Paola kept going up. So, the police stopped looking at him as a possible suspect. Paola had been through a terrible experience, which was shown by the autopsy. She had been raped, choked, and stabbed 3 times close to her heart. The medical examiner also saw marks on her thighs that were longer than normal. It was clear that Paola had bravely fought off an attack. Her attacker had physically split her legs, leaving bruises on their thighs that looked like fingers. Also, the doctor took male hair from her body and kept it as proof. Paola was buried at St. Michael's Cemetery in East Elmhurst, Queens, on February 2, 1991. After Paola's tragic death 4 months later, her family chose to move to Flushing, New York. They got help from Victim Services, a private non-profit organization in Flushing that helps victims of violent crimes and their families. The Families of Homicide Victims program, which is also run by Victim Services, helped Olga feel better by giving her counseling. As the family dealt with their grief and got better, they held on to the hope that Paola would be found guilty. That being said, as time went on, Paola's story became less interesting, and it became harder to find answers. A 13-year-old girl was killed in East Harlem. This should have been a big story in every place, at any time. But in 1991, when New York was full of bloodshed, this terrible crime in East Harlem didn't get much attention. In New York City, between 1990 and 1992, there were more than 2,000 killings each year, and 6 bodies were found on average every day across the 5 boroughs. Most of these terrible events happened in poor, mostly minority neighborhoods like East Harlem, the South Bronx, and East New York, Brooklyn. Unfortunately, the media didn't pay much attention to many of these situations. Instead, the media often reported on more upscale crimes with white, rich victims that happened in beautiful places. Without the media or lawmakers putting pressure on the police, Paola's murder case was not given much attention. So, her death was never solved, and most people forgot about it for most of the 1990s. New York City's crime rate was going down by the middle of the 1990s. But there was a troubling trend that didn't go away in the East Harlem housing projects. A string of crimes that didn't seem to be connected started happening. They all involved attacking and killing young, attractive teens with big skin, whether they were black or Hispanic. In 1994, a 15-year-old girl was attacked by someone holding a knife. This case showed that the attacker had a routine that he would use over and over again for the next 4 years. He would sneak up on the girl from behind, lead her to a quiet place, blindfold her with a piece of her own clothing, force her to take off her clothes, and then attack her. The 15-year-old victim was surprisingly able to describe the person who attacked her. The young man was well-groomed and strong, and he seemed to think too highly of himself. He even told the woman, who was very pretty, that she should feel lucky to be raped by someone so good-looking. On September 10, 1997, firemen were called to the George Washington houses on East 104th Street because of a fire on the roof.
A response from a Bronx precinct who had a missing person report.
The Bronx precinct found the body of a woman who had been severely abused, hit with something hard, and burned so badly that she could not be recognized. Later, the victim was found to be Jazz Castro, who was 19 years old and had come to New York with her family from the Dominican Republic. A young mother with a kid, Joalice had been going to a community college in the Bronx to study computer science. After 7 months, in April 1998, a 13-year-old girl was the next victim in the same area. Thank goodness this young victim made it away alive. After 2 months, on June 2, 1998, Rashida Washington, then 17 years old, died in a terrible accident. Someone had robbed, hit, and strangled her before she was found in a hallway on the 15th floor of an East 112th Street housing project.
At the time we found her, we weren't sure exactly what had happened to her. We got the job as an investigative DOA.
She was nude underneath the shirt that was covering her almost like a shroud, like it was placed over her face and upper body, but she was nude underneath, no bra.
On September 25, 1998, a 15-year-old was attacked. On November 16, 1998, a 14-year-old was attacked. These 2 teens were lucky to be alive because they probably couldn't see the attacker well before they were blinded. The cops talked to her boyfriend.
Interviewed her boyfriend. We interviewed a lot of people, but there was nobody that was really sticking out as a viable suspect.
Even though more and more cases like this kept happening, the police did not officially admit that a serial killer might be targeting teenage girls in East Harlem. However, the parents of the victims voiced their concerns, which led the police to decide to move quickly. Many criminals had not yet been tested for DNA in large numbers, so there was not a very large collection of DNA samples in the 1990s. Regarding the East Harlem cases, there was a big step forward in the fall of 1998.
Rape victim 1 was originally believed to be part of a different pattern, and as it turned out, that case was not part of that rape pattern, but had created a new pattern with homicide victim Rashida Washington and this rape case.
Finally, detectives had strong proof that there was a repeat offender in Harlem who was targeting teens. In response, the police leadership put together a special task team of detectives whose only job was to catch the suspect. The cops responded by handing out a wanted poster with a sketch of the serial killer on it. This drawing was made from what the victim said about what happened. Soon after the flyer was put up in East Harlem, a tip came in saying that the detectives should pay close attention to Ace, a 25-year-old guy who lived on the 19th floor of the same building as Paola. Ace's real name was quickly found to be Aaron Key by the cops. This name brought back a memory. The name Aaron first came up when Paola's death was being investigated. The teenager named Aaron Wofford was called by police because he was seen getting into the lift with Paola and saying that he got off on the 19th floor. The unique first name Aaron came up again in the probe into the 1997 murder of Yoas Castro. Records from Yoas's phone showed that she had called a guy named Aaron Key a lot in the days before she died.
I spoke to Miss Key on the phone. I called up, identified myself. I asked her if she knew this person. She said no. She said, but I have a son who is about that age. Maybe he might know her. So I asked her what her son's name was, and she told me his name was Aaron Malik Key. And she said he wasn't home at the time. So I left her my name and number, and I said, do me a favor, when he comes in, have him call me.
It was said that he was the last person to see Paola living, and he and Yoas had been talking on the phone a lot in the days before she died. There was no way these links could have been a chance. The police chose to look into Aaron's past more. They believed he was smart and could speak a fair amount of English. He was born on September 18, 1973, and East Harlem was where he spent most of his childhood. When Paola went missing in 1991, he was living with family in the same building as her. Aaron was known for being nice and good with computers. He said that he was active in making rap music, but there wasn't much proof to back this up. Aaron was only 5'8" tall and pretty good looking. He had only been arrested for robbery in 1990, and he had spent little to no time in jail. But his neighbors had a different opinion of him. They said he had a troubling side. He liked looking through the peepholes of women in his building, and he often walked around with a portable video camera trying to get inappropriate footage. The police didn't have a lot of solid evidence against Aaron yet, but they knew how important it was to do a full investigation. They focused on the attacker from September 1998, who had left behind a black cap and a gray sweatshirt. The detectives decided to look more closely at these clothes for clues, and their hard work paid off when they found a laundry tag on one of the clothes. This tag led the police to a dry cleaner. Aaron seemed like the most likely suspect, and police were becoming more and sure that testing his DNA would prove that he was involved in the crimes. However, there was a big problem. Aaron's DNA wasn't on file because New York didn't require DNA testing for suspected felons until 2000. In the 1990s, getting a DNA sample wasn't as easy as just bringing a suspect in and asking for a swab. As a result, the police had to come up with a different plan. At first, they followed Aaron around, hoping that he would accidentally leave behind a sample of his saliva by spitting or throwing away gum. However, this strategy quickly failed. When Aaron was arrested for his part in the theft of a computer hard drive on February 8, 1999, Aaron's last stand detectives finally got lucky. At that time, there were no laws in New York that required DNA testing for arrested people, so the police had to get creative to get a sample. A female detective dressed as a doctor and approached Aaron while wearing a white hospital gown. Aaron knew what the police wanted and was determined not to give it to them. When he was done with his meal that night, he tore his paper cup into pieces and flushed them down the toilet. To make things even more confusing for the police, he switched his cup with that of a cellmate, but the police were already onto him. Not long after he was arrested, he had been in a holding cell with a few other men. During their time there, staff gave them cups. Results were back in just a few days, showing that a sample taken from the edge of one of the cups found in the police holding cell matched the East Harlem criminal's DNA. When the DNA test results came back on February 12, 1999, Aaron had already been freed on bail because he was only facing a misdemeanor charge of computer theft. At the same time, the New York Police Department was offering an $11,000 reward for information that could help them catch him. Soon, the police found out that Aaron had gone to Brownsville, Brooklyn, and met up with Angelique, his 16-year-old girlfriend. Angelique's parents thought they were going on a Valentine's Day date, but Aaron and Angelique changed their minds and instead took a bus from Newark, New Jersey to Florida. Detectives became worried that Angelique might be in danger and could end up like the other victims. When Aaron got to South Florida, he called his other girlfriend in New York twice. By this time, the news had spread that he was suspected of being a serial killer on the run. His second girlfriend called the police right away and told them that Aaron was staying at the Miami Sun Hotel, which is just 2 blocks from the beach on Northeast 1st Avenue in downtown Miami. 2 detectives from New York rushed to the hotel and began to watch it. When they saw Aaron and Angelique walking around inside, they called for help from a SWAT team in Miami. The SWAT team stormed the building and found Aaron and Angelique hiding under a bed on the 6th floor of the hotel. Aaron was arrested on February 19, 1999, and put in jail. When detectives tried to question him about the crimes in East Harlem, he stayed quiet and didn't give any information. But the police had a plan. Later, they watched and listened from behind a 2-way mirror as they let Angelique into the interview room. During the trial in the autumn of 2000, prosecutors John Irwin and Richard Plansky made a strong case against Aaron by calling 130 witnesses, including 2 of Aaron's victims. Aaron insisted on being the first defense witness to take the stand, and during the 2 days of testimony, he showed a range of emotions, from laughing like crazy to crying like a baby. His speech, which was mostly unchallenged by the judge, prosecutors, or his own lawyers, covered a wide range of topics, such as drugs, rap music, jail food, and his thoughts on the criminal justice system. Many of the families of his victims were in the courtroom, and Aaron made up a strange story to explain why he was being charged with violently assaulting several young women over and over again. He said that the police had worked together to frame him as part of a plot to kill them. When Aaron was found guilty on December 16, 2000, the courtroom erupted in cheers. As he was led past the crowd of grieving relatives, he hurled a foul curse at them. Justice was done. In January 2001, family members of Aaron's victims had the chance to speak directly to him. Olga, Paola's mother, spoke to him and asked him to understand the pain of sleepless nights, loss of appetite, and not being able to. When Olga's turn came, she talked about how painful it was to bring her daughter to the U.S. in search of the American dream. When Aaron's turn came, he started to cry and say he was sorry. This made a male cousin of Joas Castro very angry, and he tried to jump over the barrier to attack Aaron. After this, Justice Joan Sadin gave Aaron her sentence: 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Aaron was locked up in the Clinton Correctional Facility in Demura, New York. By the time Aaron was sentenced, lawmakers in New York and many other states had passed laws requiring DNA testing for people arrested for violent crimes. Since then, these laws have been expanded to cover most felony arrests, including those for both violent and nonviolent crimes. Olga's pain from losing Paola is still very fresh in her mind. She knows that the pain of a sudden and senseless death of a loved one doesn't go away with time, especially when there are so many unanswered questions. As we come to the end of this heartbreaking journey through Paola's story, her memory and the memories of the other victims stay with us. When we think about Aaron's actions and the results they had, we are left with thought-provoking questions. Please share your thoughts below if you have any other opinions or would like to suggest other cases you'd like us to cover. We value your feedback and engagement, and don't forget to like share, and subscribe.